Hi, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to Never Owned a Sensible Car. A really daft video, which I don't normally do automotive content, as I'm sure anyone who watches my stuff is aware. I mean, barring a couple of weird videos where I've done stuff with my relatively recently acquired motorbike that I used to get to work and stuff. But apart from those, I don't normally do that. I normally do either reading science fiction stories I've written or producing audiobooks, either of stuff I've written or stuff other people have written, using long dead actors, or you know the sort of stuff I've been doing anyway. But yeah, I thought, what the hell? Let's do one of these. Just a one-off, I'm sure. I'm not going to be doing this as a regular. At least I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be doing this as a regular. Now, I'm sure most of the backstory of this will come out naturally as the video unfolds, which will be in order of the cars as I bought them, and a brief history of them and what happened to them. But long story short, there are large chunks of my life where I have not owned a car or any sort of vehicle. But it wouldn't be fair to say I have zero interest in cars and vehicles, as I'm sure will become apparent as we go through my history with the various cars and other things. And even to this day, I still watch stuff with automotive content, mostly things like Robot Cantina and Aging Wheels, to name but a few. Mostly these are oddball automotive channels where something interesting and different is being done with them. So I don't just normally watch standard vehicle maintenance stuff very much. Although, to be fair, I do watch a lot of Seaside Garage as well. But anyway, without further ado, let's get to the first car I ever owned. The first vehicle I ever owned. This is a 1972 Mark III Cortina, Ford Cortina GXL 2-litre. Now, I got this car way back in 2001 when I would have been around 27, which is quite late for a first car for most people in this country. Most people tend to get their cars, at 17 or 18, so I was at least 10 years late to the party. Now, the reason for that was I went to uni in London, so I had failed my driving test just before going to uni and never got around to doing it again until way after I graduated and worked still in London, and until I got various different jobs. And for the stupidest reason possible, I got a car in order to get to fencing competitions more easily. Don't even go there. I mean, it's stupid. And obviously that quickly turned out to be not the only thing I was going to use the car for. But anyway, so 2001, age 27, I got my first car ever, and it wasn't that sensible a car to get. I got it because it was a classic car, which meant it was at least tax exempt even at that time, even back in 2001. It wasn't MOT exempt as they are now these days. It's a lunacy that we don't have to MOT these old cars. I just don't get that at all. I can kind of get the lack of MOT. I can kind of get the lack of tax. Yeah, okay, fine. There's to be some tax perks to having these old things and keeping them going. But no MOT makes no sense to me. I still get my vehicles checked to this day. Spoilers, I now have a car. Again, a silly old classic car. But let's get to that in the passage of time. Anyway, my first car was this ridiculous Mark III Cortina. It's actually pretty good. I mean, it ran pretty well. It got maintained by this guy out in the wilds of Essex. I forget the name of it, but if I find out, I'll flash a picture up on screen if he still exists, because this was a long time ago, of course. But that's where I got the thing maintained. I almost died driving it back from where I bought it, which was down in Kent, up the Thames, out along the Thames estuary a bit. As I was driving back along the motorway towards London, I nearly killed myself coming up the motorway over the brow of a hill, and there was a massive queue of traffic parked in a traffic jam just over the brow of this hill on the motorway. I slammed on the brakes, and without skidding, no power assisted. There were assisted brakes, not really power assisted brakes, but servo assisted brakes on the Cortina. But there's no anti-lock, so luckily I had sufficient skills not to lock the wheels up and pulled to a halt just behind the queue of traffic without ramming into them. But yeah, so I nearly totaled the car, having only owned it for a matter of half an hour. But anyway, got the car safely home and drove it for a year or two at least. Now, in spite of my near-death experience having just picked up the first car I've ever owned, I wasn't entirely avoiding all stupid things with my first car. I mean, I know I was 10 years older than most people in this country when they get their first car, but I still did plenty of stupid with it. I learned how to do donuts in the parking lot. I would regularly come out of junctions doing power slides with the rear wheels because it's a rear-wheel drive car, and it could do that. It was surprisingly powerful for and light for it's a British car. So it could do power slides out of junctions. So I used to come out of junctions like that sometimes just to get around, pointing the right way very quickly. Suffice to say, I stopped doing that many, many, many years ago with many, many different cars down before I got rid of that car. But I'd just like to say, even though I was 10 years older than most people when they first passed, I still did the I'm an idiot, new driver stupidity, and then quickly got over that. Until I upgraded to my second car, which was probably only about a year later. These dates may be a bit off because you have to bear in mind we're talking about things that are like getting off 25 years ago, so my memory might not be 100% accurate in all of this. Before we move on to the second car, I should say I got this car because I always liked those American Coke bottle-shaped cars of the late 60s and early 70s, and my dad had a Mark III Cortina when I was a kid, and of all the cars he'd had, I always liked that one the most. I thought it was the most cool looking, despite the fact, and I know some Ford fanatics out there are going to go crazy, before he had that, when I was very, very small, he had a Mark I Escort, a metallic green Mark I Escort, four-door. And I know many people go, that's much cooler. No, I prefer the Cortina. Anyway, that's not the point. I got that partly because of my American cars of the late 60s, 70s shape obsession, and the fact Dad had one, so I had fond memories of his old Cortina. Anyway, this isn't a completely pointless segue into that because my second car was also a Mark III Cortina, this time in 1971, 1 year earlier, Mark III Cortina GT, two-door. Quite a rare car. And I bought that from the same guy who'd maintained the first Cortina and had that one actually specially put together out of, reconditioned out of bits of old cars that he had, or old cars he had that he used to do that to. So he reconditioned this 1971 Ford Cortina GT, specially for me. Cost me a bit more than the first one. My first Cortina cost me, 750 quid? Almost as much as it cost me to insure it for myself in my first year of driving it. This one was way more expensive because he built it from the ground up. I must have paid at least $3,000 for that. Not a huge amount, but talking about 2002-ish time here, so it was expensive-ish. Still tax exempt and all that. But yeah, and my insurance had gone down a little bit by that point because I was getting a bit older. Not much though, because I was only about a year or two older. Anyway, that was my second one, and it was a great car. It had a 2-litre engine as it was supposed to, but that one had actually come out of a Sierra and was a fuel-injected version rather than the normally aspirated one that my first one had. And it had a 5-speed gearbox, which was much handier on those motorway runs. And all in all, it was a fantastic little car, but after driving it for a few years, I got a bit annoyed by, as the guy who ran the Cortina place used to say, they eat void bushes like Smarties, and he's not wrong. And I got sick of the void bushes going out on it all the time and having a rocky, lumpy, rattly back axle most of the time. With hindsight, now, with all the stuff I've learned owning cars over the year, I would probably fix that myself one way or another, but not then. And although I could do various things to fix the cars even early on, like I could change the brake discs and brake pads and stuff like that, that I could do. But I am no mechanic. And I should probably say that towards the beginning of this video. I am not a mechanic. I don't do mechanic-y stuff. At least not to any great degree anyway. Why I always lean on other people quite frequently to do this stuff for me. Luckily, I've met a lot of good people over the years who've done it far better than I could. Anyway, I got sick of having to replace void bushes on it. And so in the end, I sold it and got my first ever new car. No, I never got a new car. This was the newest car I've ever owned, though. This was a 1992 V6 Firebird, the old Knight Rider shape of Firebirds, although the last year of production of that style. And so it had these ridiculous Batman-esque plastic wings down the side, which I never really liked. But anyway, I did like the car. It may not have been a V8, but it drove very well. And there are certain things about it which I later, having driven the V8 versions afterwards, I realised were somewhat preferential. The V6 Firebirds handled better than the V8. I'm sorry, any hardcore American car fans who say it must be a V8 all the time, but the V6 Firebirds actually handled the road better. They turned more sharply, they were more sprightly. But I'll get back to that in a minute. Anyway, this car was unfortunately killed by an idiot van driver who, as I was turning right into a side road, decided to try and overtake while I was overtaking right into a side road into the side of my car, despite the fact it was 2-lane of road where I was, and he could have gone past quite happily on the left. Anyway, suffice to say, I was livid when that happened. It being a left-hand drive car, my passenger was on the side that he hit. Fortunately, my passenger suffered no ill effects. The car was very robust. I was able to drive it home afterwards. However, it was an insurance write-off because that wing, the door was completely crumpled in, and the insurance decided it wasn't worth paying for its repairs. So it was ended up being carted off to the knacker's yard, and I got money, quite a bit of money, a decent amount of money to replace the car, which I then did with this 1988 Firebird Formula 350, which was an amazing car. Now, this is even more clearly the Knight Rider body shape, although it's not like an 82 Knight Rider Trans Am. It's a Firebird, although I prefer the Firebird Formula in some ways because it hasn't got those plastic trim bits down the bottom as the later ones had. It's a very clean looking car. In fact, these pictures give the cars far more credit than it's due. The paintwork needed to be redone, it should have been at least oversprayed with clear coat, something like that. It needed a lot of polishing to make it look half decent. But as you can see from this ancient picture at a distance, it looked really good and it drove really well, although this was the car where I learnt that after having driven the V6 Firebird, if you approach the corner too fast and turn too sharply, it will continue going in a straight line. Luckily, I was able to quickly put the brakes on and stop and save myself in that case, and I learnt to approach the corners with far less gusto with the V8s. But this is what I mean by they don't handle the corners as well as the V6, let's put it that way. But anyway, quickly learnt that and loved the car. Unfortunately, after a year or so of owning it, I made the vast mistake of going out driving angry. And it also happened to be the first frost of November. And I was driving a little bit too aggressively because I was pissed off with things that don't need to worry about now. It's a long time ago. But anyway, I was obviously not very happy. And I went slightly too fast off a roundabout, hit the first frost of November, and all four wheels lost traction. And suddenly I was going diagonally along the road with all four wheels just sliding independently until I hit the central median and a lamppost at the central median, which carved a massive V right in the middle of the front of the car. The car jumped in the air by about 4 feet, spun around the lamppost, landed on the central median exactly, with me shocked behind the wheel, absolutely unharmed. The engine was even still running until I turned the key off. By some miracle, despite the fact everything was shoved back behind the front wings, you wouldn't know the car had been damaged at all. It was a miracle how much of it survived intact. But suffice to say, I killed the car which I probably liked the most. There is one more car just about to come up, which is the car I actually like the most. But if I hadn't killed it with my stupidity, I would have probably kept this car a lot longer because it was a very cool car. Anyway, suffice to say, I killed it. I felt very ashamed because that was a beautiful car. The next car, which was really the final car for a long time, was the one that came to replace it off the back of the insurance for that one. I'm amazed that I got enough insurance off this one, but they paid out very nicely and can't really complain about that. So I bought my 1991 Trans Am GTA, the same size engine, 350 engine, 5.7 litre if you want it in Euro units. And that was the best car I ever owned. That I kept from 2005, I think, when I got it, to 2012, when I finally sold it. I finally sold it because I was going through a massive change in my entire life at that point. 2012 was a big year for me. Many things happened, many things changed. And one of the things I did was, I became a student again. This is how I ended up being Dr. Alex. But at that point, I realised having a car was just a massive money drain, and I was not going to be earning anywhere near as much money as I was at the point where I quit my job to become a PhD student again. So I sold the car sensibly, but I did shed a tear as the thing drove off because that had served me very well. I'd done lots of things with that car. I'd driven across the entirety of Europe in that car. I'd gone from London to Prague. I had driven on the Autobahn through to Germany on the way. One day before Christmas, I think it was, being chased by a blizzard. I was just ahead of the blizzard, and there was no speed limit on large chunks of the Autobahn, and I got the car up to 125 miles an hour before I got frightened because the winter tyres I had on it, I love winter tyres by the way, they are awesome, and they're a legal requirement in Germany and many other bits of Europe. The winter tyres were only rated up to 110 miles an hour, so I went, oh crap. Despite the fact the car was still pulling away quite happily at 125 and sure would have gone much faster, I then reined it back down to about 110 because I was scared the tyres were going to explode. Anyway, point is, that car was really good and nippy and had it's 0 to 60 with 6.9 seconds on an automatic box, so, not bad. I also done a few things to that car. I desmogged it, which you probably shouldn't do, but the guy, Autopontiac, I remember him. He looked after all the Pontiacs I had, desmogged it for me. I changed the drive shaft for an aluminium drive shaft on it, which I did myself. Oh, I raised it. I put it on little lifters, and it's about an inch higher than it should be. Although you might be able to tell in the one picture we've got on here, but you might say, why on earth did you lift it? Most people lower the cars. Yeah, I live in London. I lived in London then. I lifted the car because there are just speed humps everywhere. Even now to this day, I watch people scraping their lowered cars as they drive around London, just scraping and scraping and scraping. It's like, nah, I definitely did the right thing raising it. Also, winter tyres. Brilliant. So many people these days drive their faux by faux, their fake 4x4s all over the place. I drove my little Trans Am out to a fencing competition again around January time, so the roads were covered in ice and snow. All these 4x4s, or faux by faux, I mean, not really 4x4s, all these stupid 4x4s that people drive right now to this day. Everyone drives vans these days, faux by faux. And they were all getting stuck, couldn't even get out of places like the roads where I live. And they were getting stuck in the roads around where this fencing competition was. My Trans Am with winter tyres on, perfectly happy, drove over every snowdrift, through every icy bit of road. Winter tyres are a miracle. I will swear by them until this. Right now, I'll continue to swear by winter tyres. They are the best thing to get you through the snow everywhere. Anyway, point is that Trans Am did a lot of service in those years. Took me massive distances, I say, to Prague and back, all over Europe. It's, of course, a left-hand drive car, and I'd owned 3 Firebirds and Trans Am, so I got quite used to driving on the wrong side of the road for the UK, but it was very handy for going off into Europe because I was on the right side of the road. Anyway, I'm perfectly happy driving on both sides of a car now, on either side of the road. But yeah, that car was brilliant. But as I say, I did not need a car anymore. So that was when I got rid of my final car, my last car. Sort of. When it comes to modifications I made to the Trans Am GTA, there's one glaring elephant in the room. At least anyone who knows how the body style of the third-gen Firebirds and Trans Am has changed over the years from their inception in 82 to their demise in 92. And that is that my Trans Am GTA should look virtually identical to the 1992 V6 Firebird that I had in terms of the ridiculous Batman-esque ground effects that it had along the sides and the rather less cool, in my opinion, more smooth nose that it had as well. My 91 Trans Am GTA basically would have looked virtually the same as that until I made one more alteration to it, and that was I modified it to make it look more like a 1992 original Trans Am style Trans Am. The nose is from a 1982 Trans Am. I removed the side skirts entirely, which is where you can just see the little ribs that go down the side of the panels, which were there to help them adhere, but they're not there anymore. And I personally wasn't fussed by leaving those things visible. That looked fine to me. And on the rear, I also changed the rear lights for, I don't think it was, and the the rear lights and rear bumper for, I think they weren't 82, but they were slightly later ones. They might have been like 88, the Firebird Formula ones I had before on the Firebird Formula. But anyway, earlier versions of those rear lights and rear bumper as well, just to make it look more like the old school original Trans Ams / Firebirds from 82-ish. And I think I did a rather good job on that one. The car did look cool. The black inserts at the front on the front bumper were originally solid, you couldn't see through them, but the final iteration of the Trans Ams and Firebirds had lights mounted at that level, so I diligently took out the slats between the slats, if you like, the I made gaps in that so you could actually see those running lights through the black bits of the front bumper. And of course, the headlights were unaffected by any of this because they would just flip up in the normal way. Oh, except they have those cool little cutouts in the original older front bumper. So you had these tiny little slithers where you could see just under the lights, which look really cool. Anyway, yeah, I miss that car sometimes. I did go a long way with it. I did do a lot of things to it to make it the kind of car I wanted. And, well, I don't want massive American muscle cars anymore, but that one I do occasionally miss from time to time. Before I move on from the Trans Am GTA and the last car I ever owned, which is obviously not what it is, but I thought it was at the time, I did skip over 2 cars that I owned because they were only briefly mine, and one of them never ran. The first of those was a 1979 Camaro that I bought while I was running my way through the Firebirds and Trans Ams as my main cars. I owned this Camaro briefly. Now, it never ran. One of the reasons for that is it came with no engine. The second reason is I attempted to make it a diesel Camaro. This was sometime back, I imagine, 2003, 2004. I was still living on the Thames at that point. I didn't really have any workspace, but somehow I did manage to... I had an engine hoist. I managed to get a 5.7 V8 diesel engine from an Oldsmobile into it. I had it rigged up. It even ran. I had it just about connected to the gearbox. At some point, it got transported up to my parents' place, my mum's place up in Nottinghamshire, and it was briefly being worked on up there. In fact, the picture you can see of it is where it was sitting on my mum's drive, much to her annoyance. And before I could get it running properly, Mum said, "Get rid of that thing, it's taking up room on my drive." And I couldn't really argue. I just got it to the point where it was about to work, and then I think the starter motor died. At that point, I thought, sod it, let's just get rid of it. This is just taking too much time and space up. And so, yeah, there's the Camaro, but it never drove. Shame. It looks great in this picture, but this picture is of a low-quality phone camera, plus it's a long distance away, and that's been hand spray painted over a lot of Bondo and primer with a rattle can in that beautiful gold colour. It looked a lot better than it actually was. And then there was the black Vauxhall Victor, which I did own at the same time as my last Trans Am. That did run and drive, and I, as you can see, ham-fistedly tried to make it into a 2-door. It isn't a 2-door, it's still a 4-door, but it looked like a 2-door at a distance if you don't look too closely. Suffice to say, I enjoyed that for a short amount of time, but I tried to get it through his MOT. The guy who was about to MOT it was MOT'd but expiring, spotted loads of holes in the floor pan, and at that point I thought, let's just get rid of this. These are money pits and time vacuums. So I got rid of the Vauxhall Victor as well. But yeah, I did have these 2 other silly cars in that earlier period when I had cars. And so I had no cars. I dropped all the cars because I think I already said I was becoming a PhD student. This is where I turned into Dr. Alex eventually. And I knew that my cars were just a money drain, and I did not have the money coming in, being a poor lowly student, to afford all this frivolous nonsense of cars. And I also reasoned that we had a perfectly functioning public transport system in this country in 2012. And, well, I was right then. But yes, I thought I don't need any vehicles at all. However, within 2 or 3 months of starting the PhD, I had a moment of madness and bought a Capri. A 1.6 Capri, 1983, I think. I drove it for about 3 months before selling it. It had a very wobbly front wheel at about the point where I was selling it. And I did mention to the guy buying it, I don't think you should drive this home. I think you should trailer it home. I think the front wheel's going to fall off. And he went, no, I'll drive it home. And he did. And I got a phone call later that evening. The front wheel fell off. He didn't blame me. He said, no, you told me about it. I shouldn't have done it. And luckily, the front wheel was recovered from where it rolled to. And he managed to maintain control of the car, pull it to the side of the road, and he got trailered back home. So all's well that ends well. But I wish he'd listened to me and trailered the thing home. Anyway, so at that point, really, for real, no vehicles at this point. Because, as I say, we had a working public transport system in this country, and I was a poor student. Why on earth would I need a car? Or any other motorised vehicle for that matter? Well, that leads me on to the later acquisition of vehicles. So around 2021, 2022, I was getting increasingly hacked off with taking the train to work. It wasn't just having to share train carriages with people. That wasn't the only reason I didn't want to take the train to work. It was also that the travel cards that we pay for to take the public transport in London were getting stupidly expensive, around £180 a month. And at this point, I started taking the bicycle into work. But that's quite tiring because it takes about 45 minutes to cycle to work and there's lots of hills. So I thought, just to make it a little bit easier on myself for travel, I decided to buy the motorbike for use some of the times a week. This motorbike, I didn't have a motorbike license. I passed my car driving test, as you know, later than most people, at the age of 27 in 2001, but I had not got a motorbike license. So I bought this motorbike, had it on L plates. The bike itself is a classic bike because London has stupid zones, ULEZ, other payment parts you have to go through, which if you have a classic vehicle, you are exempt from. Again, I don't know how this works. It certainly won't be lower emissions, but I guess it's the ultimate in recycling, getting an old vehicle. Anyway, for whatever reason, classic cars are exempt from several of these charges and barriers to driving in London. So I got this classic motorbike, the 1982 Honda Superdream 125 Twin. Quite unusual, being a 125 Twin. Even then, when it was first built, it was fairly unusual. And it works really well. And it only cost me £750, £750 for my American audience. And although I've spent a few £100s over the years, subsequently having it repaired, tarted up, just made nicer, running better, new carbs on it at one point. A new exhaust. I put the new exhaust on. That was because it had the wrong exhaust on it, so I put the right exhaust on it. I've put a new seat on it recently because it had a bit of a knackered old seat, and now it's got a nice seat. Anyway, the point is, even with the few £100s I've spent extra getting it up to a nice standard, this bike immediately saved me money because I was paying, £15-20 a month in petrol using it, as opposed to the £180 a month for the travel card. It is ridiculous that in this country it's cheaper to use a classic old motorbike rather than the public transport. But hey, what am I going to do? So as I say, I didn't get the bike because I thought it looked cool, or because I thought it was cool to be riding a motorbike. I got it because I thought it was practical. I never thought I'd get a classic vehicle because it's practical. I stopped driving classic vehicles because it's not practical. There you go. It's a mad world we live in. And I still wasn't going to get another classic car, I told myself. Except my mother once said wistfully, as I was heading up there regularly on the train still, with a bicycle. You can take the bicycle up on the train for free if you book ahead. I'd take the bicycle to the town near where mum lives, cycle out to my mum, visit, do chores and stuff, come back on the train with my bicycle. But mum said, "Oh, it's a shame you don't have a car." And I thought, oh, great, okay, fine. I better get a car just so that mum can have stuff done for her when I go up and visit my elderly aging mother, so I can transport heavy goods and shopping for her if necessary. Which is why I got my final silly, not sensible vehicle, the DAF 44. The DAF 44, 1972. Also a classic car, also tax exempt, also ULEZ exempt. It's just ridiculous. And again, by and large, it has saved me money. It wasn't so much that this would save money over the public transport in the rest of the country, although the rest of the country's trains are expensive. I actually have a Dodge where I can get about a third off, but that's not the point. It's more that it becomes so unreliable. I couldn't trust the trains to get up to my mum to do stuff. So, car it is. Classic car it is. The car has had several repairs done on it, and it's not like it's never been off the road, but the car is working well when it works well, and it does return. Well, it was returning 40 miles a gallon when it was working properly initially. Then it got a bit worse. Then it was recently had an engine rebuild, and last time I checked, it got 50 miles to the gallon, which is ridiculous. By the way, this is a twin-cylinder engine it's got of 844 cc's. That's why it's a light car. This is why it's getting such good MPG. But yeah, so there you go. I never thought I'd get another classic car. I never thought I'd get another classic vehicle. I never thought I'd have another nonsensible thing in my life to get me from A to B. But such is the way of the world now. it's more sensible to have a non-sensible vehicle, or two, than it is to have no vehicle at all, or rely on public transport, and probably cheaper than buying a brand new car, because brand new cars cost like a house or something. I mean, it's just stupid. Oh, I didn't mention, the DAF cost me £1,500, 1,500 quid. Shortly thereafter, a twit ran into it while it was parked, and it went off to be repaired, and I thought it was going to be another insurance write-off, because they took out the whole front wing. However, the insurers said, no, we're going to pay for this. Oh, rather, they're going to claim it off their insurance, thankfully. But no, it won't be an insurance write-off. We know that the car's actually worth about double what you paid for it now. This is 3 months after I bought it, because all classic cars have gone through the roof. Or at that time they had. Talking about 2022-ish here. Yeah, 2023, maybe 2023. Around that time, the cars just leapt in value because everyone in London wanted a classic car, so they can drive it in London, and it's tax exempt and it's ULEZ exempt. That's an emissions thing for those who missed it the first time. So yeah, we live in a mad world. I've never driven a sensible car. I had chunks of my life where I had no car or vehicle at all. But now, such is the way of the world, I now drive two non-sensible vehicles to get me around, either to work or up to my mum's in the middle of Nottinghamshire, which is miles away from me, in London. So, yeah, I think I've said all I needed to say. And I hope I haven't forgotten anything, but, it's just a very silly video about how the entire world is very silly now, and there's no point having sensible vehicles. And on that note, to all my watchers, subscribers and viewers, I hope you enjoyed this video of silliness. And until the next video, whatever that may be, to all of my watchers, subscribers and viewers, I hope you'll join me at the next one. And until then, take care.
Masters, mistresses, the Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, masters, mistresses.